Welcome, everybody, to the Liberty First Foundation's Roundtable. With everything that's going on, it's kind of hard to pick and choose what we're going to talk about this week. So we'll just see where the conversation takes us. There's a lot of things going on in the United States, and a lot of things that need to be discussed, a lot of things that a lot of people probably are not aware of. With that, I'm Michael Marshall. With me is Frank Johnson and Michael Vasquez. And welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, hey.
Good evening, everybody.
So,
Oh my God, what a weekend.
So the publicized hearings for January 6th started off last night. Did either one of you two get a chance to watch any of that?
The worst moment in American history.
No one watched it because no one cares.
Oh,
I literally know zero people who have talked about it, even from the left, on my Twitter feed, on all my social media. No one cares. No one.
mhm. Yeah. And honestly, I think the only reason why they're publicizing it and the fact that they held it in the middle of prime time is it's a publicity stunt. That's all it is.
It's for the
And the
election.
thing is just flopping.
It's for the election. The reason why they're doing it in June, the reason why it's prime time, is because they have gotten all the polls and they're going to have a landslide loss of Democrats. The economy, 8.6 inflation. That's by the government, which means we're at about 12 to 15% real world, which means that the average person's paying 30% more at the store when they go and buy just about anything. We see that they passed 7910, the Protecting Our Kids Act. I told you last week they were going to do it. We were talking about it. We knew they were going to pass this. Takes away
we knew it was going to get through the House. The problem is whether or not it's going to get through the Senate, and I really don't think it will make it through the Senate.
I can only pray, but again, they've got 50 votes plus Kamala 51. They can get it through the Senate.
There's 6 Democrats that said that they aren't going to vote for it.
Yeah, those are guys who they want to win their elections or their primaries, but they need the money from the party. So don't count on that. Mm-hmm. And it's called Protecting Our Kids. Do you really want to vote against something that's protecting our kids? So they passed that. They're about to try and pass a national red flag law, HR 2377, in case people don't know about it. They're stealing our rights with things that are never going to make us any safer. If you doubt that, guess what? New York has, since 2019, we've had red flag laws, and we had the Buffalo shooting. Red flag laws will not make our kids safe. They will not make us safe. Doesn't work, never has. And we have the entire country's falling apart on so many issues. Everyone is pissed at Biden, who can barely recognize that he's president. And then they said, well, we've got to do something. Nothing else they have done has gotten any traction. So the only thing they have left is prime time, January 6th. It was worse than Pearl Harbor. Really? Okay, and just 2 days ago, a radicalized far leftist, self-admitted far leftist, who is going ape because of all the radicalization from the left, from the Democrats. He's an abortionist and he's an anti-Second Amendment advocate. And he decides that he wants to not just protest in front of the Supreme Court homes, which we've covered on the show, is illegal. No. He decided to assassinate a member of the Supreme Court because if you aren't agreeing 1,000% and obeying the progressives, the only answer they have is violence.
Yep.
That's why they have January 6th out right now.
Well, here's one huge thing that I have some very big issues with. Okay, is they have this January 6th select committee that's doing this huge investigation on January 6th. Okay, where was the select committee that investigated when they stormed the White House? in the summer of 2020.
Or the fire that they committed on May
Correct.
29th. Or how about this? This select committee that's supposed to be so involved. I've seen a ton of research that has been done on January 6th. How about they actually produced the video, which I have seen, it's been in several documentaries, of the Capitol Police beating an unconscious woman who then wound up dying. It is the same woman that the news media initially reported, well, she just died of a drug overdose. No, she didn't. Then they changed the story to, well, she died of a heart attack. No, she didn't. She died because a Capitol police officer was beating her with a baton. She fell down unconscious, and he kept beating her while she was laying unconscious on the ground. There is actual video of that, and this guy got to walk. There wasn't even an investigation. And let's in the J6 meeting.
Let's not forget that the only firearm discharged that day was discharged by Capitol Police killing a woman.
Right. And that was soft walkthrough. That guy got off without a real investigation. And we can't even, most people don't know this. The Capitol Police are separate of any inspection by the public. They answer only to Congress. There is no FOIA for them. You cannot get any of their records. You cannot insist that there's going to be a public investigation of the shooting like you can do in any other police force, including the FBI throughout the nation. No, they are absolutely separate of the completely separated from the public.
Any accountability.
Yeah. So this is a farce. This is a way for them to go out to their base and say, January 6th, if you're a Republican, you're J6, you're an insurrectionist, so vote Democrat. That's all this is about, because they're not showing the evidence that is out there. They're not showing the video. They're not talking about the fact that the only people who died were civilians because of the Capitol Police. They won't mention that there were some 500 people allowed to walk into the Capitol without a question. They won't go into the fact that 600 of 724 people that have been arrested and placed in jail for a year have charges of trespassing. Are you kidding me? They don't want to talk about the reality.
Well, they've been in. A lot of them have been in jail for over a year.
Yes. There are people who are still in jail right now without a trial because...
And without any real charges being levied against them.
You know what? Let me ask you guys. Can you name do you know the number of people who have been charged with insurrection or kidnapping or aiding and abetting terrorism from the Chaz, which is the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or the Atlanta Autonomous Zone, or the New York City, Brooklyn Autonomous Zone, the Autonomous Zone in Austin, Texas, the Autonomous Zone in Indianapolis, the Autonomous Zone in Boulder, Colorado? Yes, there were that many of them, and they all had the same number. You know how many people who have been arrested for those charges?
0.
Exactly. And they want to tell me that January 6th was an insurrection? Are you crazy?
Yeah. Actually, Jan Raines brings up a very good point. They aren't talking about how Pelosi and Schumer denied National Guard 3 days before. It's actually been stated, and I'd have to verify for sure, that nobody is actually allowed to question Pelosi over this. Or
she's
over
not
her
on
response to the threat concerns that were raised prior to January 6th.
This is a farce. You've got AOC going out on Instagram crying, oh my God, I can't relive that moment. You weren't in the Capitol. She was never threatened.
No, she wasn't.
Her story has changed 4 different times, and none of it makes sense because none of it matches up. But she's crying on it because she's AOC and she's trying to make a political point. And it is a perfect example of the absurdity to the degree that the Democrats are trying to push this message. It is exactly like the Russia collusion hoax that went on for 3 years. We had 4 investigations, $31 million, and it was never true. It's like the Ukraine phone call hoax, which they tried to impeach Trump for the second time, which was absolutely false. It is an mockery of the facts that actually exist.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it is literally a kangaroo court. And the whole intention of it is to try to bring some type of charges against Trump. That's the whole premise behind it all. It isn't to hold anybody accountable other than Trump.
Because they can't win 2024. Guys, chime in. Tell me that anything I've said is wrong. Tell me if you disagree with anything that I'm concluding about this. Because I don't think anyone in America, except for progressives, believe any of the things that the J6 committee is saying, or don't recognize that this is a targeted political campaign against one candidate, because Democrats, after 4 years, or in 4 years, they cannot beat him. That man owns the Democratic Party. They can't do anything without talking about him. I mean, that's what I think is they literally everything that happens in America since the day Trump decided that he was going to run has been Trump. I don't think they can go a day without mentioning Trump's name. And this is what this is all about. And that's really sad. The Democrats are they have so little to offer the nation that they cannot go a day without connecting something to him as they are destroying our nation and our rights.
Okay. And I mean, we've been talking about January 6th, but like I said, it's a kangaroo court. It's all designed to try to get something on Trump because they weren't able to get on when he's in office, and they know that he will be running in 2024, and they have no hope against him.
None.
So that's basically it. Now, other things, like you said, the House did pass the Protecting Our Children's Act, or Children Act, and that in and of itself is a farce because it really does nothing to protect anybody. It just makes it more burdensome for people to be able to protect themselves. What you got, Jeremy? You don't have to raise your hand; just pipe in.
I know, but I'm keeping myself quiet. I'm in a foul mood today for many reasons. But does anybody here watch Guns and Gadgets or Firearms Policy Coalition?
Don't know them.
Okay, so Jared from Guns and Gadgets pointed out in the Protect Our Kids Act, Protect Our Children Act, there's a portion of it that basically, if read correctly, the way these scumbag politicians operate, if you take apart your gun to clean it and put it back together, you will be violating that act.
Section 3, I believe that is.
Talk about how you can't put the parts together, and if you do, you're in violation of it. So it's just an attack on. I'm working on an article for our webpage right now. I'm only about a third of the way done, but I'll be putting that up soon on that exactly. It's just absolute scum bullshit.
Well, and again, I will say to anyone who wants to say HR 7910, Protecting Our Kids Act, and they're like, oh, yes, this is great. Name one item of the 6 points that they have in there. Name one that actually will protect anyone in America ever, because they can't.
Did anybody get a figure about how much the bill was going to cost and how much of that cost was going to be spent on firearm education classes for children or people who are not gun owners or anything? How many educational classes are going to be taught? Gun safety classes, anything about education, so that kids know
No.
what to do if they find a gun, so that kids know what to do if their school gets, comes under fire, so parents can, better understand what guns do. I mean, you would think if you're going to protect children, there'd be some bit of education in there. And I don't know, but if you're going to protect children, you would think there would be more specific guidelines about school security.
Yeah, that's my thing. Where is the stuff for school security?
You would think that part of it, you would think there would be some guidelines. You think that there would be some monies made available so that schools could be hardened. I don't know. Or did we just give it all away to Ukrainians?
Well, they made suggestions because a lot of these schools have money left over from COVID grants that they're given that hasn't been used, and they've made several people have made recommendations that they use that excess COVID money to harden these schools.
They can't.
And literally it's been shot down every
can't.
suggestion.
They can't. They would have to put in, those are grants. They can't use the money however they want. They must use it in connection to the pandemic. So by law. So if they even try to harden the schools using that money, they're in violation of the grant, and therefore they would lose the entire grant and have to repay it all back. It has to be an act of Congress to rewrite the grants to allow it to be used. So
and that's what they've suggested. They've suggested that Congress pass legislation to allow these schools to use that money to harden their schools rather than just leaving it set.
Jan, to point out your comment, it is qualified as a mass shooting by definition.
Well, mass shootings they changed the numbers recently with the FBI, and the latest ruling is that it would be 4 individuals who have been shot, including the shooter, at any one incident, which can be connected to another incident, which is a big change in the way that they used to do the numbers.
That is, yeah.
Because they didn't include the shooter before, and it didn't necessarily entail any other location. So they expanded. Basically, it's like the way they've rewritten the definition of vaccine. They rewrote the definition so that it would give a result that is more amenable to a ideology. So again, it's because the numbers, honestly, you see things like Mother Jones and some of the news agencies, there's been 200. No, there hasn't. And if you actually go through the list, they'll say, oh, this gang was shooting another gang on school property. That's a school shooting. No, it's not. This guy got mugged with a gun on school property at 12 at night on a Saturday. That's a school shooting. No, it's not. So you got to look at the details. Just like we were talking about last week, when they're using the Duke University a study by Duke University to say that red flags work. Right. And they don't, because if you go through the study itself, Duke University's red flag study on suicides and the effectiveness of red flags on suicides, go to page 202 and page 192. Read the paragraphs. I believe it's the middle paragraphs of each page, and you'll see the actual results. It doesn't work, and it has never worked in any state since 1999. And they're putting out this lie because they expect it's why every source does not link to the study. So that because I actually found the study and I actually have read it. And if you actually go through it, you'll see it does not work. This is again all these lies.
Well, that's it. Okay. And there's really no way to tell if it's effective or not. Plain and simply, because if you take guns and nothing happens, well, then they'll say it's effective. But who's to say that that person would have actually done anything?
Yeah, but Matthew McConaughey's up there, and he said they got to turn in the guns because it's a sacrifice we should all be willing to make. Matthew McConaughey has spoken, so Matthew McConaughey is going to dictate to the rest of us that it would be so much cooler if you handed in your guns.
Well, Matthew McConaughey also says, as requesting legislation to be passed by Congress that honors the Second Amendment.
He does. He is an actor and an activist. Yes, I like him in his movies. That has nothing to do. Why are we paying attention to entertainers?
Well, that's it exactly.
Well, they're the best among us, Michael. They're the best among us. They're the brightest. They're the most skillful, most worldly, the most well-traveled, the highest educated. These are the people that can inspire a nation to action.
Only in a good movie with good writing. They don't independently know a damn thing. Mark Ruffalo is trying to tell the people of Brazil and the Brazilian president that he knows Brazilian politics. Yeah, the president of Brazil had to come out and say, you know what, this isn't a script. You're not playing Dr. Banner in the Incredible Hulk. You're not a scientist. You don't know a goddamn thing. Stay out of our Brazilian politics. Mark Ruffalo. It's an example. These guys don't know what they're talking about. No. And worse yet is when they start going around like Jay-Z and Beyonce, they're like, oh, but I think Cuba's great. You are multi-millionaires being towed around on a leash throughout Cuba with the government having arranged the entire visit because you are celebrities and they're using you to sell socialism.
Yeah.
This is the reality. These are LeBron James in China is not getting treated like you or I going to China or anyone who lives in China because he's selling socialism. He is a sellout. These entertainers are sellouts. They don't understand what they're talking about. They don't live like we live. And
they're playing a script.
Yes. I mean,
that's all they're doing. Okay. They play scripts as much in the real life as they do on the silver screens. Their entire life is nothing but a script.
How many of these guys are giving up their private security? How many of them are telling their private security, not only, or even tell their security, you can't be armed with a gun or you can't wear body armor? Please, which one? They're not doing it.
Well, here's the thing. Okay. I got into a discussion with somebody this week, or actually on Twitter. And one of the people said, well, they need to put a 10,000% tax on ammunition. That will avoid the issues with the Second Amendment.
Don Beyer out of Virginia, he's a Democrat, and he wants a 1,000% excise tax on every gun purchase. So you buy a firearm for $500, you will pay in addition $5,000 to own that same $500 firearm. That is simply saying that if you are poor, you do not have a right to defend yourself.
Exactly.
And this is for the rich and the powerful to be able to have power over everyone else. There is no other way to describe that.
Yeah, and that was exactly my point. Was that if you do that, you are saying that people of color people that are unaffluent,
Women.
women, anybody that isn't extremely wealthy is not, their lives are no longer worth protecting.
Well, I heard the women only have to pay 83% of the tax.
Yeah, that should be the new slogan coming out from the feminists. We're only going to pay 83% of the $1,000% tax. It's and the media, the way that the media is putting this stuff out, they word it like it's such a great thing. Let me ask someone. Here's the simplest way to think about that. And I would say this to Representative Don Beyer of Virginia and to the people of Virginia. What criminal cares about a tax? They are criminals. They don't care. They're not going to pay a tax so that they could rob the local bank or to mug a mom and her kids. They don't care about that. It's not stopping a criminal. If anyone in the world, including Representative Don Beyer, can explain to me how a tax is going to stop a gang, a criminal, or a crazed individual, please explain to me how that's going to happen, because it's never happened in the history of the world.
Okay, so
Well,
I'm going to pull up an article from CNN.
I'm very passionate today.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting very ridiculous what they're literally trying to state, and how they're really trying to make the Second Amendment as a communal right, and only a right that is for citizens of the militia. And they always avoid the fact that militias are literally the entirety of the people. In fact, I think it's Maryland's Constitution. That actually gives a definition of what the militia is.
You know, while we're waiting for that to come up, Jeremy, Frank, guys, has anyone seen a single stat of any of the gun control laws that have been put out to date in any state, Chicago, Baltimore, California, New York, anywhere, that actually shows that gun control is effective? The way that
No, it doesn't exist.
Okay. And yet we're still going by their game book, but they have no evidence that it ever works.
They rely on education and what sounds good on paper, what sounds flashy, and made up stats and things like that to get their way.
Well, for the same reason that you don't ever see a story about how socialism really works. Because you always get the same response. Well, it hasn't been done right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing with gun control. Well, it hasn't been done right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whatever the crazy nutball idea that they have, it's never been done right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how many times do you get? How many bites of the apple do you get with showing absolutely zero positive impact? How many bites do you get before at some point somebody says, all right, we got to take away the keys to the car because they don't know how to drive, and they know it, and that's the worst part about it, is they know that their ideas suck. They know that their ideas don't work. The only thing about their ideas that they know for sure is that one group of people benefits from their ideas while everybody else suffers. But they all believe that they're going to be a part of the group that benefits from the idea. They all believe that they're going to be the bourgeois. They all believe that they're going to be the ones that are in power while everybody else suffers. Believe me, AOC fancies herself, to be Evita. All right. She wants to be Eva Peron.
Yeah.
That's what because she believes in her utopia that she's going to be the one. She'll be Imelda Marcos with the shoes.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to be the one that has all of that, and everybody else can eat cake. Marie Antoinette and all the rest of that. They all think they're going to be on that side of the power shift. What they don't ever see is that side of the power shift in the countries where they do have their ideas in full swing, it's like less than 1% of the people benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
All of these people who keep trying to feed that alligator don't realize they're going to be on the menu.
Mm-hmm.
When there's nobody else to take from, they're going to be the ones that have to offer themselves for the idea. And that's when you wind up getting the freedom fighter.
That's
one who used to be a part of the system, but now fights against it. Well, forget about all the people who told you from day one that system doesn't work. They're too stupid, because nobody wants to listen to the people who told you, said, I told you so. They are only going to want to embrace the ones that say, I used to be a part of this group, but then I saw the light. Well, you brought on the policies that now you're complaining about.
Well, you notice
it's these idiots that are running around out there now, saying, "Oh, I'm going to have to get an electric car because look at the price of gas." You voted for it.
Mm-hmm.
You voted for it.
Yeah.
You put your money behind the policy that drove the prices of everything up. And now you're going to turn around and complain about how the policy doesn't work, but it wasn't your vote that caused the problem. No, it's got to be some other reason. It's got to be Putin in Ukraine. It's got to be the truck drivers causing the problem. It's got to be this one causing the problem. It's got to be it. No, it can't be the fact that the economic policies suck that you supported. It's got to be something else, because when you finally admit that it's the policies that suck, you have to take possession of your own culpability, and they will never do that.
100%. And let's not forget the fact that look at all these people that are moving out of California and Oregon, Seattle, into places like Utah, Texas, Arizona. And they're like, oh my God, I cannot believe how crazy it's gotten there. And then all of a sudden, they're pushing for those same policies in our states. Don't California my Utah.
Yeah, I don't understand. That's why New York has been leading the state, all the nation, in people exodus for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're falling apart because it's just like what we see. And to what you were saying, Frank, these people think that they're the leadership. They're going to be in charge of the new progressive socialist country. They forget in every example from Soviet Russia, from Mao's China, from Che Guevara, and in Cuba, the answer has always been the first people that those guys kill when they come to power, teachers and politicians, even within the same party. The very same people that put them up, they line them up and shoot them in the town square.
Well,
that is a historic fact.
No, I think Joseph Stalin is the person who invented Photoshop. Because if you look at all the pictures of him at the beginning of World War II versus all the pictures at the end of World War II, you'll notice that the pictures at the end of World War II, usually him standing by himself, and the background has all been erased because all the people that were around him that he had executed, that he saw as a threat, he had them all executed. Everybody that was closest to him, he had them whacked. So all I know is I'm going down to my DMV one day this week, and I'm going to see if I can't pre-reserve a vanity plate from the Department of Motor Vehicles, because I'm seriously thinking about going and getting myself an electric vehicle. I don't have the money for one yet. But when I do, I want to do it. But I want to make sure that I have my custom license plates, ready for it. And it's going to be Burns Coal.
I like that. Yeah,
That's going to be my vanity plate.
I like that.
Either that, or I was working with a friend of mine a year or so back. We were talking about getting a first generation Prius and figuring out how to shoehorn a Cummins diesel engine into it.
There's a guy who does Tesla stuff. I can't remember the name of the channel, but he took a Tesla and stripped all the batteries and everything and put a V8 engine in it. It's not a diesel Cummins, but he put a V8 in a Tesla to piss people off.
Well, I don't think somebody bastardizing a Tesla for some reason or another doesn't have, to me, the same smack of irony as a Prius.
Oh, Prius. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I still think Prius doing it like a Prius is got that, that's that Bronx cheer, sound, kind of thing. Well, that's just we wanted to put a Cummins in a Prius, and then somebody beat us to it.
It probably would be safer for the environment if you did do that to a Prius.
It would.
Well, you wouldn't be stripping 22,000 pounds of soil in order to get the materials that you need for one 1,000-pound battery. That powers one of those cars.
Anybody want to guess what? Since we're talking about electric cars, and this is what I deal with now in my field, is what the electric cars are doing to automotive shops?
Well, I would imagine they're killing them. I would imagine.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of failures still, so that's helping. But okay, so I won't name the shop that I work for, and from now until February 28th, 2023, my shop has to spend, I think the grand total was $114,000 on equipment, mandatory from the manufacturer, so we can have this stuff to service these vehicles. Do you want to know what the curb weight on the average Silverado is? A 1500 pickup?
No,
it's I'm going to be wrong. I want to say the curb weight's like 5,000 pounds.
It's like 5,200 pounds.
Yeah, 5,200. The curb weight on the my shrunk. The curb weight on the new Silverado EV is 9,500 pounds. So the average lifts in all of our shops aren't made for those. So we have to buy not one but two 12,000-pound 3-position lifts. We have to buy a forklift that has the 70,000-pound capacity at so many feet extended with 10-foot forks or whatever it is to take the batteries out of them. We have to buy 3 high-performance charging stations plus all the stuff they want in this shop to do this. It's $110,000, $115,000 worth of shit we are forced to buy just to do the few that we may see.
All right, now let me throw something at you. Just a couple of
we'll make money off of them eventually, but
I'm just sitting here listening to what you're saying. And you got 5,200 pounds to 9,500. Okay, that's a 4,300 pound difference. 4,300 pounds. That electric battery charged at full capacity may take that truck, let's just say, 500 miles. I'm just giving it the benefit of the doubt, Jeremy.
It's way less.
I know it's way less, but the way they turn around and they do these EPA testing standards, it gets 24 miles to the gallon. Get downhill with a wind behind you in a perfect vacuum.
Yeah.
All the rest of it. So let's just say it gets 500 miles per charge. That's 500 miles at 4,300, 2,000. What was the difference? Yeah, 4,000 to 2 tons.
Yeah.
To travel the same 500 miles with an internal combustion engine at today's fuel mileage with the new motors that they got, let's say a modern V8, you can get 40 miles to the gallon. But they have these, all of these ones with the variable assistance, 9-speed transmissions, all the rest of the silly crap and everything else. So let's break it down to 15 gallons of fuel. We'll get you 500 miles. At 6 pounds a gallon. That's what, 60? That's 90 pounds of fuel.
Give or take, yep.
90 pounds of fuel to get 500 miles versus 40 some odd 100 pounds of battery to get 500 miles. As you burn gasoline, you're carrying less weight. The engine becomes more efficient because it's less drag, less coefficient, less weight for the motor to pull around. The battery is constantly the same weight, regardless of how much electric charge is in it. Battery doesn't change weight. The battery maintains the same weight. So gasoline engines become more efficient for longer duration of time, while the electric battery stays at the same efficiency. Gas engines are about 35% efficient. Electric batteries are somewhere around 90% efficient.
Okay.
When you look at the numbers and break them down, you're still going further with gas than you are with electric.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
When you break down the weight and cost factor. And when you now let's look at the environmental damage that you do between manufacturing those batteries and filling up your car with gas.
Mm-hmm.
You're causing less emissions with fuel than you are with the battery when you consider how much fuel you got to burn to extract the elements you need to make the battery, the disposal fees, manufacturing costs of the battery, and all the rest of that silly crap along with it. And then what happens in 4 years, 5 years when the battery is no longer worth anything?
Well, they say batteries are supposed to last 8 to 10 years.
Nope.
Before they drop below 80% capacity.
Mm-hmm. They say that.
Okay, they consider the batteries to still be good as long as they are able to charge to 80% of their original capacity.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I can buy a cast iron block Chevy 350 motor, a crate motor, completely manufactured, completely done. The only thing I have to do is put on the drive belt mechanism, intake, and my exhaust. And Jeremy, you might know that what is somewhere around $4,200.
It's about right. Yeah, about $4,000 for a crate motor.
Right, not an LS1 or an LS2,
just a standard 350. Yeah,
standard 350. You're at about $4,200.
Mm-hmm.
A Tesla battery for one of their cars right now, I believe, is $21,000.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're forgetting. Well, you're not forgetting. I mean, I might have had to contemplate this. Frank, you're a car guy. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of tires are on your pickup?
Right now, I'm running Firestone, all-terrain, something or other. So I don't know. What
probably like a P265 7017 or some shit.
32, 50, 32,
okay, 32, 12 and a half.
32, 11 and a half off 15s.
Okay, so P-metric, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Okay, the new trucks, you can't run them. You have to run LT tires. So now, as a consumer, you're going to go from an $800 set of tires to a $1,600 set of tires, which are also harder to break down and be used for things because of the way they're manufactured. So when you are swapping out, I mean, you can break down most tires and use the rubber compounds for other things, strip the metal, playground equipment, shit like that. But the tires that you're putting on these new ones are going to cost you more, and they're also harder to dispose of.
Well, I'll give you one thing else too, like the CVT transmissions and stuff like that. Like you find in all of these all-wheel drive vehicles, like the
almost all vehicles now.
All of these vehicles that are now coming with standard all-wheel drive on them, if you have one tire, if say you burn through your 15% of your tread wear on all 4 of your tires, and you have to replace one tire, so you have a blowout, you can't just replace that one tire. You now have to replace all 4 because the motors that are inside of these electric wheels are all calibrated to turn at the same RPM. And if you decrease the diameter of the tire that you have, you're getting more or less RPM for the same speed. And that's going to throw all of that stuff off. So if you have one tire to replace, hey, yeah, I can spend $300 on one tire. No, you're looking at $1,800 for all four.
Well, my good friends at my good friends at a local shop have a machine where if it's a real bad scenario like that, you can actually pay them $30 to shave the rubber off your new tire to match your other tires.
Well, I guess that would be better than
if you're in a pinch,
the other freight.
It helps. But
if you don't
so
have
that's another $150.
Well, just the one tire, so $30.
Well, if it's a matter of saving $900, we had to replace the tires on our Subaru last year. We had to replace all 4 tires, $1,200.
Here's the thing that nobody's addressing really on this whole talk of electric vehicles. Number one, our grid does not have the capacity to support it. There is no way you can even stretch it that our electric grid can handle that many electric vehicles on it.
There's two things.
Go ahead.
There's two things that nobody's touched on about the electric vehicles that really need to be a concern of everybody that doesn't make a pile of money. One is not only the cost of replacing these lithium-ion batteries, but when you do go to replace the batteries, you get charged for recycling the battery. And it's a pretty significant charge that you get charged. It's not like core charges for batteries today where you take a battery in.
Yeah, where core charge is like $25.
Yeah, well, they're actually charging the consumer to take the old battery out of the Tesla cars and recycle it. So you're paying for the entire recycling of the old battery.
I think it's in the thousands, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the one documentary I watched a couple of weeks ago. A guy paid $22,000 some odd for his new install of a battery for his Tesla. And it wasn't the top end battery. It was like the lower kilowatt per hour option. And for almost $3,000 of that was recycling and reprocessing fees of the old cell. Wow. So you're not only being ripped off on the fees of the battery to replace it, but you're also paying them to take it, recycle it, remanufacture it, put it back out there and sell it. So they're double dipping the consumers through that market. The second thing that nobody's been paying attention to here for the last month, with the fuel costs going through the roof and all of these, I shouldn't say all, but these couple of states that have been trying to really figure out a way to implement road tax because the electric cars are going to take away from the economy from the fuel sales. Companies, especially Tesla, have been pushing the consumer more into a trade-up leasing program. A lot of Tesla vehicles you can no longer buy right now because the demand is so high that they can't produce them fast enough. So they're pushing the consumer to trade in their car for a 3, 6, 9, or 12-month leasing program that you are not guaranteed to get re-signed once it's up. And when it's done, guess what? You've traded your vehicle in. Now you're left with nothing. And it's bitten quite a few people so far. And if you look into some of the leasing fees for the options of Tesla, I was just going through it with my stepfather the other night. It can cost you anywhere from $3,000. It's close to $5,000 just to start a leasing program with Tesla to lease a car. And then if you get a 3, 6, 9, or 12-month lease, it's anywhere from $3,500 upwards to $18,000 in a year just to lease a Tesla. And they want you to trade your vehicle in to take away some of that cost. But then in the fine print, it states that once your lease is up, you're not guaranteed re-signing of that lease. You have to enter a new lease. Well, the second lease you enter, you're going to get screwed on because now you don't own a car to trade in and eat some of that cost. So it's literally putting the consumer in a long-term debt deficit to Tesla.
Mhm.
What I was trying to get at with the electric grid and this other point that am going to make is there's no way that we are even ready for any type of large adoption of electric vehicles.
No.
No, look at California. They've already
grid.
hit, like, their grid can't handle it all.
The
Well, they
electric
got the
grid
rolling
cannot handle
blackouts
it.
already.
Yeah.
Number two, and this is one thing that you guys were just talking about with the weight. Okay, every time a vehicle travels over a bridge, those bridges are designed to handle certain amounts of weight. But each time a passenger car runs over that bridge, it degrades that bridge a little bit.
Yep.
Now you take heavier vehicles and start having more heavier vehicles driving across those same bridges, they're going to deteriorate a lot faster.
Mhm.
And our road systems aren't capable of handling that much heavy traffic.
Well, we
Well,
have.
Go ahead,
no, sorry.
Bass. I'm sorry.
We know that we have an infrastructure that is completely screwed up, and Democrats have been promising to fix that for a long time. But just so anyone who's wondering, the best case scenario to replace our electric grid, which is absolutely necessary if we're going to go down this social experiment of electric cars and green renewable energy, we have to redo the electric grid.
Mhm.
That will cost, best case scenario, from the left, $4 trillion. Real world, $9 trillion. Trillion.
Mhm.
All right, let me throw some.
For the grid. We can't afford that.
All right, let me throw something in there for you to think about. What the hell does the government have to do with replacing the electric grid?
I know.
This is a matter of supply and demand. It's electric companies and consumers. They have a product. We need a service. General Electric put up the wires in New York City. They're the ones that electrified the World's Fair. They're the ones that illuminated the New York City skyline. They brought electricity everywhere. Government had nothing to do with any of it. Okay, it's the consumer.
Well, don't you understand? It's infrastructure, so that automatically makes
I don't
it.
want to hear the infrastructure argument. I don't want to.
Well,
hear
it goes into corporate lobbyism.
Right, but
It
this
makes
is
it
how far.
government's responsibility. Did you know that?
This is how far we've gotten away from the idea that these should be the public utilities are a consumer product.
Yep.
Well, that's it exactly,
Well,
and that's
if we didn't rely on government for all of this silly crap, the infrastructure would be in much better condition.
You're goddamn right it would.
Exactly.
Have the option of being able to get their electric supply from one or more sources. The electric companies would have to compete for that energy delivery, and they would have to ensure that the delivery was going to be more efficient, less expensive, and everything else. The government had nothing to do with it. The government should have nothing to do with that. The only part of the government should have anything to do with is the national highway system. That's it.
not even that.
And we're already packed up the ass and told up the ass for that crap too.
Well, speaking on that exactly, how many of your guys' states require annual registration for your vehicles?
Every state does.
They all do. Well, no, like Idaho does like a 4-year thing. Texas does 2 or 3 years at a time, so they're not all annual. Some of them are spaced out. But my point
some are
is
semi-annual.
Yeah, so Utah is an example. A 2018 Chevy Malibu is going to cost about $225 to register. A 2018 Tesla is almost $400, and they do that because they cannot get you on the gas tax.
Well, did you see the mileage tax?
Let's get back to Frank's point just here for just a second. Okay, the way Congress has authorized, quote unquote, constitutionally authorized spending on infrastructure projects is through the Post Roads and post offices clauses of the Constitution. And the truth is, that's not applicable. They've also tried to get it through the interstate commerce clause and the necessary clause. I'm drawing a blank on word right now. Okay, they've tried several things to try to justify their infringement on infrastructure. And the honest truth is Congress has no authority. The national government, the federal government, has no authority over any infrastructure projects whatsoever. They are authorized to do post roads, which means roads between post offices. That's it.
Well, this is all just every day I sit and I look and I always think about somebody. I always hear government's got to do this, government's got to do this. There ought to be a law. There ought to be this. Stop it. Stop it already. You have gotten so trained in the thought that government has to have a role in every goddamn thing that we do that we can't figure out how to do anything on our own anymore without somebody saying that some government official's got to do something. Or then, who do I have to see about getting a permit? Who do I have to ask to get permission? Who do I have to do this? We have capitulated so much of our own free will at every level. We're afraid to go outside, and fix our side. You can't fix your sidewalk in front of your house without getting a permit. But if somebody trips on the crack, they sue you. But the city owns the concrete.
Well, I'm sick of both of those.
Everything has gotten so far out of whack. This is such a departure from what our founding fathers had envisioned, and it's such a departure from what our own grandparents had thought. I mean, we go back, what was it? Income tax has only been around for 100 years. We had roads and we had a military long before then. Where the hell
everything got out of hand when
did it happen?
We had to start forming more forms of government. When we had to start having local municipalities, counties, boroughs, townships, and
those always existed.
Yeah, I know, but it's
those always existed.
The process
prior to
I've been in highway work since I was 16. I've traveled all over the country building highways. I've worked for TxDOT, PennDOT. I've worked for the New York State DOT. And it's really crazy the amount of bureaucracy and democracy involved with getting a road project done. You have to file for a permit, and it's got to go through your local municipality, and then it has to go through the environmental agencies local to your area, and then it has to go through the State Department of Transportation, and then it has to go, and it's like I get a kick out of all these people because where we live, the roads are horrible. I live in Amish country, so our roads are absolute dog shit. Pardon my French, but everybody complains and says, why can't we fix these roads? Why can't we put money into these roads? Well, if you go down to the township, it's literally a little 2-bay garage with 4 employees. And when they try to file a paper to get any type of road work done, it takes them 5 years to get a response, and nothing ever gets done. And then the money that they budget for it is already all used up on something else because they've had to do other things throughout that year or that quarter or whatever. And I don't understand at what point in history we delegated the decisions to a state level. So here's my question to go with what Frank was asking. Being in highway work and being around this stuff, if a township or a municipality decides that they need to fix a road and they have money in their budget to fix the road, why does the state or the federal government have to have any authority or involvement? Why can that municipality, as a body of government, not make the decision to fix their road?
Technically and constitutionally, the federal government's not supposed to have any say over that. Okay, that is a municipal right or a state right.
Right.
Well, if you look
Okay,
at how, but look at how, look, let's not think about it in the regard of what's legal, what's this, it's like everything else. Follow the money. Follow the money. Because so long as you have one guy bigger than the next guy who's doling out the money that he took from the smaller guy to begin with, he puts the shoestrings attached to it and how you can spend it and how you can't spend it. So you get money gets sucked out of your small towns, it goes into your county. The money gets sucked out of your county, goes to the state. The states get the money sucked out that goes to the Fed. The Fed puts it all into a big pile, and then they figure out, okay, who's the popular people up here in Washington, D.C.? We're going to grease the pockets of those politicians so they can keep getting called back to Washington and have 17% favorability rate with a 98% reelection rate. The money goes back to the states where the popular politicians can get it back, and then that money has to trickle back down because as long as you're doing what the federal government says, then the state can have the money. Then the county's got to do what the state said. Then the town's got to do what the county said. Then that little podunk town that you live in with one, four-way stop, 2 horses and a buggy, they got to listen to the bigger town. It's all about the friggin' money. You just got to follow the money. If we stopped sending all of our money from one place to another and kept everything more local, if we went back to a bartering system in our small towns and our small communities where monies weren't being exchanged and this way taxes weren't being collected, you would all of a sudden see how some of your smaller towns have money left over at the end of the year to be able to do those projects without having to have anybody's permission, because we wouldn't be standing there with our hands out looking for grants.
well,
We wouldn't be standing there with our hands out looking to get a piece of that pork barrel money that came in with that congressperson.
that's the thing is
when we unified the dollar so that all the states use the same money, that's when we kind of signed our own death warrant, because there was a time when you could go, every state had their own currency. Then you would have currency that was split among the Northeast, the Southeast, the Northwest, the Southwest. We had money that was going in. I'm sorry, but we had different monies that had different exchange rates, and it worked. It worked. The federal government got nothing.
the only time in our history where the states have had different currencies other than what is nationally available is prior to the first Congress.
But
So the original 13 colonies used to each have their own separate currencies. And that was all brought together under the Constitution to be a single national currency. However, that national currency was because to be done in specie and not in paper money. We didn't get paper money until Hamilton decided to start up the first national bank.
Let's see. I think there's the biggest problem, and I think we're seeing this and we're discussing it, is one, we went away from the gold standard. I mean, that's what the whole Wizard of Oz is about. That's what it was written about, is the gold standard. And we went to a fiat currency, which allowed us to create debt. And that debt has always grown. But the real cause of the problem isn't so much the debt. It's that we're spending money badly at a federal and state level that destroys the currency at the local level. And that's one of the leading reasons why we have inflation and going into stagflation, why we are in a recession, and it may be going into a depression. And I'm not saying to scare people, but we're printing so much money. We printed $80 billion to give to the Ukraine. We're going to print money so that we can create all of these policies, a national red flag, and all the bureaucracy to run all of this anti-Second Amendment nonsense. This money doesn't exist.
Well,
ghost
they're
money.
getting ready to print money for another round of COVID payments.
Exactly. And so we're spending this money and we're filtering it through a bureaucracy that is bloated. I mean, bloated. We have more middle managers in every level of government at state and federal level. It's ridiculous how many people you have to push paper to get anything done. And it's not serving a purpose. We're spending money badly on bad ideas that are social experiments. And the result is that we are destroying our economy. We are removing people's rights, and we are weakening our nation on a real, absolute level right now. It's terrifying.
Well, yeah, and you can't forget that, like when you said for the rounds of COVID payments, the first one, the assholes gave themselves a $36,000 a year raise or something like that. It was some astronomical raise as part of the COVID bill because they had to deal with the situation. Fuck that. And I won't pardon my French.
It's ridiculous. I mean, spending. It was starting to get. It was bad under Trump. Spending was bad under Trump. It was bad under Obama. It is horrendous since Biden's taken office.
Can Mike was saying something that reminded me of a test I did earlier. I know a couple of you guys are following National Firearms Coalition. Two of our followers, both, hang on a second. Two different followers got banned from Facebook today, and made new accounts and messaged the page. They posted the 33-minute interview from May 11th, 2013, the Kitty Worthman interview, where she spoke about surviving Nazi Austria and the Holocaust. And she, in the interview, if you've ever watched it, if you haven't, I suggest you do. It's a really good interview. She describes from start to finish the German takeover of Austria in her homeland. And it describes everything that we're seeing now to an absolute T. I mean, everything that happened in that time frame in her youth is what's going on in America right now. Well, these two gentlemen posted it on their Facebook, on their personal timelines, and they both got banned. So I live streamed it to our page just to see if Facebook would do anything to us, and I didn't get anything. I didn't get a message, didn't get a fact check, didn't get banned, didn't get nothing. And what I learned yesterday, if you pay attention to, I don't know, do you guys know who Tom Hartman is? Free Speech TV.
Yeah, I know. Now I'm thinking, yeah.
Okay. So a couple of his followers attacked our page yesterday and started tagging us in some of his videos and stuff on his Facebook page. And it got pretty heated. But throughout sitting there having logical, statistical, and factual debates with these people, they would just resort to name calling. They would just resort to hate talk and false facts of history that are just not proven anywhere. I started seeing all the misinformation crap. I started looking at the other side of this political spectrum, you know, the stuff that we sit and we discuss and we talk about, the history, the significance of history, and the facts. And then I go watch these guys on their shows, and they just sit there and they just say, oh, misinformation is evil, disinformation is evil, donate now to stop the spread of disinformation. And the biggest thing that really made me chuckle was they sit there and they say, this is free speech TV. We need this network in our country to save America. And then I listened to and I watched on TV while I was sitting here being blasted on his page. A guy called in and questioned this guy on the Second Amendment and where it came from and said, do you not understand that the Second Amendment is in place to divide the power between the people, the states, and the government to keep all three in check? And this guy just went right off on TV. Lies. You're a liar. That's the biggest lie that the NRA has been propagandizing. You know, there was no rebuttal. There was no debate. There was no logical conversation or smart or intelligent conversation. He just immediately got mad and started yelling at this guy.
But
started blasting
That's
him
what
on
they're
TV.
good at.
But do you know why? Think about it, and I remind people about this because everyone forgets. They count on us forgetting. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is young enough, she's part of the current youth generation. She was trained in school, trained in college, in that the idea is it's not about, as she said on 60 Minutes, she doesn't want to be factually, empirically, or semantically correct. She wants to be emotionally correct. That's why the term their truth, not my truth,
Yes.
your truth. That's where this truth came through. That isn't the truth, but a shade of it, an opinion of it. Their focus, and that's why they can get away with, and they are trained because this is what the colleges are training kids. This is what high school are training kids to do. Is if you don't agree, if your emotions don't match up, then insult, attack that person, tear them down, attack their character, if not them in person. And that's what they do because they don't know how to, they've never looked at the empirical, they've never looked at the statistical, the actual information. They only know the interpretation of it.
Yep.
And that's why they get so angry. And that's why, and I was talking about this on my channel and a couple of places. Do you notice every time someone disagrees with the approved messaging that we see in major media, then the left, they attack a character, they try and shut down that voice, and then they go and resort to violence, just like we saw this week when they tried to assassinate a member of the Supreme Court because he didn't agree with what might be, not even is, might be the Roe versus Wade decision, and he doesn't agree about the Republican point of view or anyone's point of view about the Second Amendment. That's their natural reaction. That's something they have been taught. They don't know how to deal with anyone who goes, well, factually, gun control has failed. Actually, Roe is not a right. It isn't a constitutional right. Actually, no, taking away Roe does not take away women's rights, nor does it stop them from having abortions. They can't hear that because
No, they can't hear that.
Yeah.
And
Well, the big thing that really upsets me over the whole Roe v. Wade thing, I'm not against them when it's for medical reasons, or
nobody.
well thought out reasons, and a doctor says, yeah, maybe so. But like, I didn't really get too invested in the Roe v. Wade stuff that was going on for the couple weeks that it was. My stepfather was insanely heated over it. It's kind of hard because he's a very hardcore leftist. And he came home from work the one night and went up to my mother and he said, "Did you see what Oklahoma just did? They just full on banned all abortions." Well, that's what the headline said. But if you actually went and read their article, their legislation on banning abortions, it clearly in bold words stated that medically necessary abortions due to rapes or an issue where a woman might not be able to carry full term are still legal and can still be performed under a doctor's discretion after a doctor has deemed it necessary. So they did not full on ban them and just say, oh, nope, no more. You got to leave the state, blah, 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 blah. And he turned it into this great big rigmarole of Oklahoma just passed the strictest abortion bans, screw Oklahoma, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, you didn't even read it. Like, you didn't even read the actual legislation that led to the law. You just automatically read the headline and started bashing Oklahoma, saying that they are the worst state ever.
Well, that's named HR 7910, the Protecting Our Kids Act, so that they say if you vote against it, regardless of, they know no one's going to actually read it like we did last week. No one's actually going to read the bill. No one's going to know that it's completely ineffective, and if anything, hurts American citizens from protecting themselves. It's going to hurt women and the poor and children. And instead, they're going to go with, well, you're not protecting the kids. You must be evil. It's that mentality. They're going off of emotion because they are counting on the fact that they have taught people, do not read, obey. And that's a problem.
Well, look at Biden and Beto O'Rourke last week. Said on live TV, Biden was talking about, and I don't know when Biden said this. He might have said it earlier on, and they just replayed the footage. But two stories that I saw last week that really cracked me up that became our topics of discussion. O'Rourke was trying to tell everybody, and I think Biden was too, that an AR-15 is designed to
decapitate,
rip the body apart from the inside out and decapitate the body. That when you fire a bullet from an AR-15 style platform rifle, it is going to rip you apart from the inside out. But if you take that same bullet and fire it from a hunting rifle that's bolt action that only shoots 5 rounds, it's designed to shoot true and straight and go straight through.
Oh, so you missed our conversation last week about this.
I did. I must have missed it, but here's my logic. Here's my mindset on this. How ignorant do you have to be to listen to that statement and believe it?
Well,
Hollywood.
How ignorant do you got to be? A bullet does not have a brain. That bullet does not know, hey, you're loading me into a magazine for an AR-15. I better get my tumble on. Like, come on, man. And then Biden saying that if you get shot with a 22 in the lung, a 22 caliber bullet is small enough that we can probably extract it and save a life. But a 9mm is designed to blow the lung straight out of the body.
It's yet another lie from a man who doesn't understand.
It's all fear mongering. Well, it's all fear mongering.
He needs a shotgun.
You need to go blast 2 shells.
Shoot a shotgun up in the air. You'll get rid of your intruders.
Like I tell my wife,
commit a felony.
Take your shotgun out onto the porch, and you let 2 blasts off, and there's no more. Joe's telling people to go out and commit a felony.
That's correct.
Just
God, there's. Does anybody remember the video? Sorry, go ahead. Finish.
I got to bug out of here in a minute. I got a puppy in a crate screaming all his lungs out. He's got to go out. But I'm just letting you know that I'm in the process of writing 2 articles right now, and one is going to be, yes, guns are for killing. That's the title of one article. And we're going to completely strip apart every single one of the leftist arguments about guns by doing the one thing that so many on the NRA side of the gun support thing don't do, and that's tell the truth about guns. And then I'm going to also be writing an article about abortion, which I'm
Dun,
sure
dun.
is going to ruffle some feathers in a way that they've never been ruffled before.
And if you're not already, if you haven't already seen our website or visited our website, you can find those articles posted on l1f.us. If they aren't there, subscribe to our newsletter, and just as soon as they're posted, you will be notified.
Well, listen, I'm going to get out of here right now. I got stuff to do, but guys, thank you so much for being a part of this. Zach, it was great to have you on the show. With you guys, are going to still stay here and keep shooting the breeze.
I got a
just
cigar
got things
waiting.
to do. In the meantime, love you guys. Be safe. I pray for everybody. Be safe. Shoot straight. Talk to you guys soon.
Good night,
Have a
Frank.
great night, Frank.
Good
Thanks.
night.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
No, I was going to say, if does anybody remember, speaking of teaching people to commit felonies, I don't know, five-ish years ago, there was a video of a lady who convinced her husband that they needed to destroy their AR-15. So they take it out in the backyard with a chop saw and chop like 8 inches off the barrel. And they're like, that's how you destroy it.
Yeah.
An AR-15 is like, well, you just committed a felony.
Yeah, it breaks the
Mhm.
firearms national NFA.
Yeah, NFA, yeah.
Firearms Act of
Congratulations, you've made it. Your legal AR-15 and SBR.
Yes. Crazy.
Can I go back to something that he?
Sure.
I apologize. I don't. Jeremy, is that your name?
Yep.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. I'm Zach.
You as well. Thanks.
Earlier, he was saying something before we accidentally cut Frank off about the variations of registrations that people are going to start seeing, about how it's not going to really be a fixed rate anymore.
Yeah.
Because of the massive amount of effect that less people driving gasoline powered vehicles is going to have on the economy. So I actually read a couple of the freshly drafted legislation drafts that were being introduced in a couple of states the last few weeks. And there's a few states, and I don't know as if any have done it yet, but there's a few states that have actually proposed per mile tax on vehicle use.
Yes.
And the way that they're going to track it is you're going to have to report your mileage every time you register your vehicle, and you're going to get charged based off the mileage you put on your vehicle the previous year.
Well, yeah, and they're
registration.
going to rely on states who do things like emissions testing and safety inspections still to report that data if you don't.
Yeah, and when we broke down the one bill that we found for Pennsylvania, it was coming out to, based off of mileage of my of the two vehicles that they're using to go to work. They were looking at potentially having to pay almost $1,000 a year for two vehicles to be registered on the road.
Yep.
Now, $1,000 a year, sure, that's not really a whole lot, but that's a significant increase of registration fees from what right now are like $100 a year,
right.
$80 a year, and they're going to try and do this to offset the economic impact that the drop in sales of gasoline is going to have. And then I was also reading a study. Tesla has the technology right now, and if you are of wealthy enough stature, you can purchase it and have it implemented into your Tesla, where they have solar roofs that will recharge them while they're sitting out in the sun. So during the day, your car is completely self-sustainable. It doesn't have to be stopped and plugged in. You don't have to use any type of power grid, which means you're not putting any money into the power grid, into the power companies, into the gasoline companies. And the government was really hard on shutting that down real quick, to try and make it not available to the consumer, to the public. And that's just some stuff that's bothered me about this whole transition into the electric vehicles is like Mike was saying, our grids can't handle it. If you look at the infrastructure, there are probably 80% of the infrastructures of the power grids in this country have not had any type of significant updates in the last 50 years, 60 years, because we live in a society where we don't fix something until it breaks.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen? I mean, if you look at California, you guys remember Arnold Schwarzenegger when he gave his great big speech about how one day California's power grid was not going to be able to sustain itself. And everybody thought he was a giant joke and told him that it was bogus. Well, they banned small gasoline engines. Everybody had to go out and buy electric weed eaters, lawnmowers, generators, water pumps. Everything has to be electric now.
Yeah.
And just with that alone, and the people that have bought Teslas, their electric grid jumped 38%. And they're on the border of having blackouts all the time. Their grid can't handle it. So what are you going to do in a state like New York? The stuff that Kathy Hochul was basically given the authority to do. Like, they're not voting on it or nothing. They gave her the authority to say, okay, this is going to become a law.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Yeah. And remember, unlike California, New York has winter.
Yeah,
right.
Snow, which is not batteries.
Well, Texas, I mean, they were like, oh, go solar, go wind. And then they had that big freeze. And how many people died? How many millions of dollars in infrastructure damage and all that stuff? It's like, where's your solar now? Good job.
Governor Abbott was Abbott was put in a really bad situation with that. And I don't know as if I can agree or disagree with how he handled the situation and how he made himself look to the people. But I lived in Texas for a few years, and having their own independent grids for everything is amazing 99% of the time. But when that 1% of the time happens, like that freak winter storm, the neighboring states refuse to help them or sell them any outside resources because of their independence in the way that they've negotiated and stood fast in their ground with not selling any of their goods to the outside states. So it created a huge problem. And I'm scared for New York. New York, if they pass this law and they start banning all these gasoline engines and the small
it's already
gasoline
passed.
engine cars,
by 2026, you're not. By 2026, no homes are going to be allowed. No new homes.
New construction.
Yeah, no
new construction. Then what was it? 2040
or gas appliances. After 2026, no gas appliances are allowed to be sold in the state.
Right.
After 2026, no small engines are allowed to be sold in the state.
What was I was reading, but I got interrupted, and I don't think I finished the article. But was it 2040? Excuse me. They were giving people that currently have homes with natural gas and stuff like that. They were giving them a certain time frame. To convert. I think it was 2040. It was 2030 something or 2040.
Thought it was 2030. I thought
it might be 20. It might be 20. It was a very short window. Because as soon as I read it, I said, "How in the hell do they expect an entire state's population to be able to afford to do that all in that short of a window?"
But here's
they don't care because then they can charge for fines.
Well, not only that, but I think the bigger problem is this isn't about these politicians who we've gone through several different examples of this. They aren't thinking about the consequences. They're passing legislation based on popularity within their segment of their base. They're looking for votes. They're not thinking about consequences of anything they're doing. And we have seen that. I can go back to the 2010 Obamacare, which we saw that when they passed Obamacare, Um, it actually changed. Excuse me, it wasn't Obamacare. It was the relief that Obama put through, and it actually changed that when he gave that credit to everyone in the nation, 2010.
Yeah.
It actually changed a bunch of people's income because that was considered income, just like the check we just got.
Yeah.
What they don't think of, and it actually just happened because of the checks we got for the pandemic relief, then that suddenly goes against your income, and people who are relying on the government to be able to give them federal aid, which is approximately 55% in the nation, you no longer qualify because it bumps your income above the ceiling, and people lose food stamps. Predominantly SNAP is usually the first thing that they don't count on. It's happened with Obama. It happened again with Obama. It was 144,000 people. They won't even give the number today because they won't even do the math on it. But we know it has happened. It hits people at the pocket. They don't think about it. They're telling you, okay, we're going to 1,000% exercise tax on getting a firearm. Okay. And you haven't thought this through because that doesn't stop a criminal from getting a gun or using the gun. The tax never hits the criminal. Gangs and such never hits them. Doesn't stop. And on top of whether you pay that or not, does not prevent you from then using this gun in an illegal manner. They don't consider the consequence. No. They're not thinking about the consequence of red flag laws that will be used as a political weapon, and they have been used as political weapons, and they have been used to harm people, ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, ex-roommates. That is a fact. It has happened since 1999 in every state that they've put this out in. And in New York State in particular, it caused the death of an Oneida man. And that's just a fact. So again, they're not considering the consequence of what they do because they don't care. It's not going to affect them. It affects us. And people have to keep that in mind. When they're pushing these things, we got to do this by 2030. We don't have a grid. The batteries don't work. You're in different climates across the nation, which is not effective for you. You can't afford this. Well, it doesn't matter. We have to do it because, environment, and it's always the changing thing. The greatest threat to America is environmentalism, or it's someone who doesn't agree with the progressive ideology, or, they constantly change that, but they haven't thought it through. And that's the problem.
No, they haven't. And do you know where this 2030 date comes from?
UN?
WEF. World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
Which essentially is the UN.
Yeah.
But
well, have you guys ever Jeremy was talking about the wind and solar. All right, where we're at, there's tons of wind farms. They put up tons of windmills. A year ago, I started my own construction business, and about 6 months in, I got a letter from the state of Pennsylvania for the solar stuff. All right. Have you guys ever actually looked into, have you ever had a guy come to your door canvassing for a solar conversion for your house?
Oh, yeah.
Once.
Okay. Have you ever actually looked into that? Because it is actually it's a government scam.
No, I shut my door and say, have a nice day.
Well, I looked into it, and I listened to a canvasser try to sell me this. Now, mind you, the canvasser was just a random Joe Schmo. He was not a technician. He knew nothing about the solar panels, nothing. Yep. He was reading from a pamphlet that was handed to him to come to my door. So I looked into this program, and it's shocking to me that so many people sucker into this and pay the government, and it's absurd. But the way it works is the guy will come to your door and say, hey, we're going around in the area. If your house is a certain height, certain pitch, roof, certain degrees of the blah, 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 you can get solar panels for free. Government will pay for them, blah, blah, blah. Can I get a couple pictures of your roof? Can we measure some stuff? And they'll put you through this big pitch, and they'll come back and they'll say, okay, you're pre-approved. Well, you know what pre-approval means, all right? Doesn't mean you're approved. It just means you're pre-approved. You could still be denied. So they get all these people on these pre-approvals. A government-paid contractor will come out that's getting paid from government money, install all this stuff on your roof, convert your house to solar, and then 6 months later you'll get a letter in the mail saying that you were denied for such and such reason, and now you owe the government X amount of dollars that you have to pay back every quarter with your taxes, or every year with your taxes.
See, Zach, you're mentioning something that's real important. There are several bills that are being proposed, especially in New York State, where I believe it's Bill A7777, if I'm remembering it correctly, where they're looking to put in a 5-year term. You get, for any firearm, you have to get a renewed license every 5 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Every 5 years, the government has the right to deny you the ability to own the property that you already own. And this is the catch-22 people aren't thinking about. Oh, but I'm licensed now. Yeah, but will you be licensed in 5 years?
Yep.
They can deny you.
And there's nothing that says that they have to renew it.
Exactly. And now, the second they do that, you are now a criminal. The moment, and they have your address, and they know what you have, or at least they think they know what you have, and they can come to your door at the very same moment. And this is how wicked it gets. So your registration is down, and now you are a criminal because you have illegal possession of a firearm, which is violating the law. They can also initiate a red flag law against you at the same time because you are now a threat because you have broken the law, and they can take away your children because the home is too dangerous for you. It's the thing that people that I always try and make people understand is understand the consequences and how they dovetail. Someone will say, well, Mike, that's not what the law says. No, but that's what the law allows if someone wants to use it that way against you. And
that's right.
As someone who is outspoken against these ideas, they'll use it in that exact manner.
Well, right. It's the hidden underlying agenda, just like we talked about with this new Protected Children Act, and how if they see if you do a video of you cleaning your gun and putting it back together, you are boned. It's those hidden little details.
What is that going to do? What is that going to do to all the people? Here's what I got. Here's what made me laugh. What is that going to do to all the people that do gun reviews and break down a gun?
They're done. Unless they're licensed, they're done.
So if Tom, Dick, or Harry want to keep their YouTube channel with 1 million subscribers,
they're going to have to become an FFL.
They're going to have to get an FFL
or
just to be able to do gun reviews.
Yes.
All right.
So here's one that hit me yesterday. Here's one that hit me yesterday, and I don't know if you guys have talked about it.
Jeremy, go eat.
Yep. See you later, man. The Border Patrol thing. Did you see anything about that?
They've been keeping the border very, very quiet lately.
No, well, my stepdad come home from work yesterday or the day before, pissed off because do you remember? I don't remember what year it was. I think it was, I want to say the 60s. Border Patrol was given the authority for search and seizure of all vehicles. The Congress recognized
within 100 miles of the border.
100 miles of a border in either direction. And your vehicle is not an extension of your domicile or your private property. Therefore, while you're on a public access road, it is public property and they can search it. And apparently, and I've not been able to find anything on it to read it and actually verify it, but he showed me a thing on Reddit. People were pissed off because apparently in the background of all this stuff that's going on right now, Congress just gave the Border Patrol the authority for search and seizure without a warrant of houses within 100 miles of either border.
That I have not seen. And
I haven't seen either.
I'm trying to find it. I can't find it. I can't even find the Reddit post that he showed me the other day when he came home from work. But he was really mad because we live within 100 miles of a border. You know, there's a lot of major cities that live within 100 miles of a border.
Right.
And if this actually has been written into law, or the law has been amended to include houses, that would mean that the Border Patrol has the authority to just walk right into anybody's house.
Fourth Amendment is gone.
And your
Yeah.
Fourth Amendment's just gone if you live within 100 miles of a border.
Which I do.
And the article that I read on Reddit seemed like a pretty well-educated guy that was pretty put forward, and he was bringing it to light, saying, everybody's so worried about these J6 hearings, everybody's so worried about these celebrity divorce proceedings, but what nobody's been paying attention to is what Congress is doing in the background. And then there was a link to a .gov site that showed a congressional meeting regarding Border Patrol authority, and it referred to the authority of the search and seizure of vehicles, and vehicles not being an extension of your private property. And then it made references to domiciles, houses, buildings, any structures within that 100-mile range. And I went back to try and find it yesterday and read it because I wanted to kind of touch base on it with our page. I can't find any information on it anywhere.
Which could either mean that it's either being suppressed or it was not correct, one or the other.
Right.
It's one or the two. And I really, really hope that it's the fact that it's not correct. I really hope that it's not something that's being withheld. But in my honest belief and my faith in our structure of government, I don't believe it. I think that it's probably been passed, and I think that it's being withheld, and they're doing everything they can to keep it from being public information.
See, it's healthy to have the discussion and to distrust our government. I mean, we're supposed to. That's what the First Amendment's for.
Right.
And we have a government that we have seen right now, and I try to mention this often. Biden lied to the American people. And I'm not talking about the Second Amendment and whether you can own a cannon, which is absolutely been debunked. Everyone should know that's a lie. He keeps saying it, but it's a lie. No, I'm talking about Afghanistan.
At
this moment,
there
are hundreds, potentially thousands of Americans that are still abandoned in Afghanistan. We know that. We know that 6 times it has been documented 6 times that the Biden administration has gone before Congress and or the American people and come up with a brand new different number. The number has gone from 100 to 85 to 6 to 249 to 99. The number has changed almost on a monthly basis on how many Americans remain abandoned in Afghanistan until they decided in late January of 2022 to stop even mentioning the name of the country or the fact that what we're doing. The State Department won't even talk about it anymore. Even when they are directly asked about it, they ignore the question. And when we have a government that has gone that far to ignore the lives of American citizens, its absolute primary purpose of the federal government is to protect the American people where the states or individuals cannot protect themselves. When it is lying about that, how can we be sure about anything? Which is why we have a First Amendment to say, now we absolutely must talk about these things. And yet the left is saying, but you can't say that you have to be shut down because hate speech. No, it's First Amendment. It's talking about my government, but it's misinformation. That's for me to find out. I'm not supposed to just blindly obey. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? Remember UFOs, government. How many decades did they say they don't exist? This year they said, oh yeah, they exist. We know about it. Let's tell you about it. Well, for decades, you lied to us. You said it actually did not exist. You put a TV show on NBC back in the 70s saying this Project Blue Book does not exist. This is all explainable. Now you're telling us 5 decades later, oh no, it's real. It's real. But don't worry about it because it's not important.
Well, the real question that you need to ask about that is, why did they decide to tell us now?
That's my point. It's you've been lying. And also, if I have a government where we can document repeatedly that they have lied to us, that they have misinformed the public, when we have a news media where we have credibly found, like NBC last month admitted, the beginning of the month of May, that they have plagiarized dozens of articles. We have the New York Times denying a factual story that it takes them 2.5 years to about 2.5 years to actually figure out is true, because they knew it. They just didn't want to tell us. When we have factual evidence that we are being lied to, it is omnipresent for the public to say, I don't trust anything you say, and I must have verification. And I don't care if someone wants to say, well, that's misinformation. How would you know? You're the guys who are putting out the misinformation.
Jan,
Proof of it.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's the thing, is they have constantly lied to us. You can find all kinds in the historical record of the United States, all kinds of times when the government's lied to the people. We can look at Tuskegee, when they were claiming to treat black males for syphilis, when in effect they were actually studying them and weren't treating them, and letting syphilis run rampant through the population. Another time when the United States Navy launched a chemical attack on the west coast of the United States, to see how chemical warfare could be used. I mean, there's countless times throughout our history where the government has outright lied to us.
Well, let me address one thing that Jan is bringing up about the Disinformation Governance Board, the otherwise known as the Ministry of Truth of the Biden administration. And Jan is saying how there's an article, and I didn't see this, saying it was up and running for months and that it hasn't shut down. They never said it was shut down.
No, they said it was paused.
It was paused, which means it still exists. It still can function. Pause does not mean stop. But the way the media put it out, which is misinformation, is saying, oh, well, they're done. They're going to shut it down. No, that never was said. So right from the beginning, again, current day, people are looking for examples. I mean, you think August and all of the end of 2021 is too long ago. Okay, the Disinformation Governance Board is actively misinforming the public by saying, oh, well, it's shut down. It's probably going to shut down. It's going to shut down. It's not shut down. It still exists. And they've got 75 days so they've got another month before they ever have to question it. And all they're going to do is rename it, rename the mission, and reinitialize it. It's not going
the Disinformation Governance Board was started, and I cannot be quoted on this because I have to research it and actually figure out which one it was again. But when Biden first got into office and he went on that spree of signing all the executive orders, one of the executive orders included in pretty good detail a new government entity to dismantle and try to stop the spread of disinformation and misinformation.
I haven't read all 40 of the executive orders that he did in the first 2 days. Literally.
Yep. In one of them, there was a little by article in a bylaw that gave them the authority to start this entity. I've never done the research on how government bodies are formed, like the FBI, the CIA, the ATF. You know, does a president or Congress or Senate just will them into being?
Congress has to authorize it.
Okay. But in one of those, and I'll make it a point to look into it again so that I can find it and share it with you guys. But one of the executive orders gave them the authority to start up this Disinformation Governance Board. And there's been a couple of mentions of it from then till now. If you even go back to when Zuckerberg was doing his congressional hearing on Facebook, and he admitted that the fact checkers are strictly opinion based. It is an interpretation, and it's opinion based off of research that they do collectively on the internet.
Actually, let me correct you, Zach. That was actually revealed in the lawsuit by John Stossel against Facebook. And
Okay.
in the lawsuit in court, so this is a court document fact that Facebook admits all of their fact checkers are in fact opinions, not fact checkers, and are not required to prove any of the accusations they're making. They're stating a counter opinion, and that is so. It's something that is confirmed. It's not just a guess. It is in court documents. It is the John Stossel lawsuit.
Okay. So here's what bothers me with that is if it's been proven and if it's court record and it's documented that fact checking is opinion based.
Yes.
How do these fact checks that get negatively reported at groups, pages, people's timelines still result in people getting banned?
Because Facebook can do as they wish.
Yeah.
The biggest problem that we have with the spread of misinformation is suppression, being suppressed. All right. And this is what my issue is with people like this Tom Hartman guy that's been attacking my page for the last 2 days. I got on his page and I got on his comments and I wrote a very elaborate comment asking him some real questions. Because when this gentleman called in and said the 2A, you know, what I said earlier, the 2A is for divided amongst the people, state and government, you know, he just went off on him, started telling him he was a liar, spreading lies, propaganda, NRA propaganda from 1974 and all this crap. He quoted Thomas Jefferson with the blood of the patriots, the watering the tree with the blood of the patriots after the French Revolution. So I got on his comments and I asked him some serious questions. And I said, I cited the Declaration of Independence where it states that, you know, the people don't only have the right, but the duty to replace and abolish a government that is no longer there for the means of the people. And I made sure that I got it all word for word. And this guy wouldn't even acknowledge me, wouldn't even talk to me. But yet he'll sit here and he'll pick apart at somebody and call him uneducated, call him a liar, and basically sit there and publicly spread lies and false information. Well, you know, the Constitution, the Declaration, the Federalist Papers, the notes from Jefferson, from George Washington, from all the founding fathers, these are historically significant documents that are stored for public view. We can't lie about these.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Let me say this. Just real quick. I'm not upset that he lied. That's not the part that upsets me. The part that upsets me is there is an unbalanced field where your organization is saying is getting suppressed and being silenced because his side, this other point of view that is the promoted, approved view, that's being pushed out. There's the problem. I mean, if we're going by the First Amendment, he has a right to say whatever he wants, although that right does not convey to something that you know is factually incorrect.
Exactly.
That being said, I'll even extend him the right to say something that he knows is factually incorrect, which is not covered by the First Amendment. But the playing field should be even.
Yep.
And the emphasis should be on, can you prove? If they're going to question anyone, show me your proof. Like on my show, I do this. I've been doing this 15 years. I have every link that I discuss in my program. It's usually about 30 to 50 links. And I show them on screen and I show the exact quote of what I'm looking at. And yet I still get attacked from Facebook, from Twitter, from the internet overlords. I get attacks from various groups that say, oh, but you're misinforming. I'm like, I showed you the source. I'm showing you, and it's a credible source. It's the federal government, the CDC, the FBI, and New York Times. I'm giving you the source. Oh, but that's just, you can't say that. See,
suppression of one side is wrong.
Yeah.
Suppression of just what we talk about, what we believe in, even though we provide evidence, proof, we provide sources, we provide details, should not be suppressed. But
No.
it doesn't fit the agenda. So these privately owned media companies have the right to silence us because it's not the agenda that they want pushed. And that's what I was trying to get at, was the suppression. It's not because we're wrong. It's not because we're spreading lies. It's just because they don't want what we're saying being said.
Exactly.
Well, that's it exactly. And I'm going to read something here from CNN because it's related to what we've been discussing all off and on throughout the night, and it directly relates to this misinformation issue that we are seeing. Okay, everybody likes to think that CNN doesn't misinform. Well, I'm getting ready to show you that they do. Okay, this is quoted from a CNN opinion, political an op-ed opinion by a Bill Press that was, hold on a second, printed today or put out today. Okay, the article is titled "Opinion. There's no way to fix the Second Amendment. Let's just get rid of it."
Oh, yeah. So that.
Yeah, I saw it.
And actually, it was put out yesterday. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I saw
it. In this article, it says President Joe Biden's proposals come close. Just jumped on me. Close to what's really needed, with his bold call for universal background checks, eliminating ghost guns, and renewing the ban on assault weapons. But even that's not enough to convince some conservative Americans that the Second Amendment is an open license to arm themselves, even with the weapons that belong on the battlefield. Let's face it, the way many judges and conservatives interpret the Second Amendment is a total con job. And as wildly misinterpreted today, it is, for all intents and purposes, a license to kill as many people as you want with as many guns as you want. The only effective way to deal with the Second Amendment is to repeal it and then replace it with something that makes sense in a civilized society today. So, he says that the Second Amendment is wildly misinterpreted today. And I beg to differ with that, because at the founding of our country.
No, don't differ with it. It is. It is very wildly misinterpreted by the entire party of the left.
On purpose.
Right. But let me
go ahead. Sorry.
Continue. Okay.
Yep.
At the founding, when the Constitution was written, prior to the Bill of Rights being established, 9 out of 13 states had constitutions that protected the individual right to keep and bear arms. So that's 9 out of 13. Furthermore, they state specifically people. Furthermore, the New York State Civil Rights Code has word for word, except for one word, the Second Amendment as a part of civil rights. And that one word that is changed is, instead of shall not, it says cannot be infringed. Throughout that, he basically goes on in this article to say that the Second Amendment, it's clear. Here's another quote from the article. It's clear from the wording of the Second Amendment itself that it has nothing to do with individual gun ownership, nothing to do with self-defense, and nothing to do with assault weapons. The amendment speaks not to rights of well-armed individual citizens, but only to citizens as.
Nope, we lost him for a second, but he's going to be back in just a second. I know his computer's having some problems, but It is by definition that article, that opinion, and that's what it is, an opinion, is not based in fact. It is not based in Supreme Court doctrine. It is not based on legal understanding by scholars in every law school or law institution across this country. That is factually on its face absolutely a lie. It is very emotional, and it does push up an emotional agenda, but it is factually incorrect, as proven by our history, as proven by our courts, as proven by state constitutions. It is an absolute mockery, but it is assuming that people will never check the truth for themselves.
Have you read any of the so I like to argue a lot with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, as you know, predates our Constitution.
Yes.
Okay. We did write the version of the Second Amendment that we have, but we adopted the idea. The ideology was adopted from way earlier. And there's actually some really awesome history that dates the Second Amendment or the ideology of the Second Amendment all the way back to the Roman empires, with splitting the power of the sword. And that's where the splitting the power of the sword. There he is. We can let him finish.
Go ahead, Mike.
This is frustrating. So I was in another quote from the CNN article where this guy says, it's clear from the wording of the Second Amendment itself that it has nothing to do with individual gun ownership, nothing to do with self-defense, and nothing to do with assault weapons. The amendment speaks not to the rights of well-armed individual citizens, but only to citizens as members of a group, a well-regulated militia. What he fails to point out is that many of the states and many of the founders saw the militia as the entirety of the population. It wasn't limited to just people that were signed up for the militia. They believed that everybody was a part of the militia. He also neglects the very important part of the Second Amendment where it says the right of the people, not the right of the militia. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Was it 15 or 16?
What's that?
Was it the original militia? When they referenced the militia post 1776, it was 15 or 16. Every male that was 15 or 16 was expected to enlist in their militia.
I believe it's 16 was the age for an individual to be able to be.
So you were expected. You were not allowed. You were expected to register for your militia, and it wasn't a military service where you went and served in a battlefield. You just had to be registered as a defender of the homestead and of the state and of your, community. And I can't remember if it exactly was 15 or 16 up to like 50 or 60. You were expected to register on that and have a gun in your property at that age.
Well, considering that they had just gone into and were going into and going through a war with England, I'm not surprised. But here's another thing that's important about this. And you notice in the document, they don't actually quote the Second Amendment. They tell you their opinion of what the Second Amendment says, but don't actually show you the words.
Right.
And this is important because we have a generation where we are raising them not to think, not to understand English. That's why we have Grammarly. You don't have to think. It will think of the words and the punctuation for you because we have generations now that are run on text speech or Twitter speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important because they don't understand English. If you understand English, which in sixth grade, I'm 54. The English class I had in sixth grade is good enough to understand that punctuations matter. They have a meaning in the way that they are put into a sentence, and you have to understand the sentence in its completeness, and you can even break down its sections. I learned this in 6th grade. I learned it again in 8th and 9th grade. I mean, this is basic English, which most people, quite honestly, do not know. If we did, Grammarly would not exist. And that's college students who don't know how to write our own language, know how to read our own language, don't understand what punctuations mean. Because if you read the Second Amendment as it is written, even without knowing the history, you cannot come up with the opinion that is being pushed out by the anti-Second Amendment organizations and movement. You cannot. It is very explicit. They took a great deal of pain to be as laser point exacting as they could about our amendments, especially the second. There is no way to say.
The other big thing that everybody fails to realize is, when I was watching that guy's show today, you know, he was arguing about how the founding fathers, you know, they were the new body of government. So why would they give you a right to get rid of government? They don't want to lose the power they just attained. Well, that argument is so ignorant, because you're talking about a group of people that just came out of a 5-year Revolutionary War. They were a group of people under a tyrannical form of government prior to the revolution that rose up, you know. So before the war, they weren't all politicians. They weren't all kings and queens and governors. You know, they were the original politicians, the founding fathers. So they went into this with an attitude of, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? You know, we were all people.
They even went further. They created an entire structure of government that is meant to be transitory and temporary. You can't say that they want to protect their power base when they built in, I have to be reelected every 4 years.
Right.
They built it to be transitory and not expect anyone to be their lifetime. It is never, by its definition and its structure, it is meant to be transitory. How can you tell me they're trying to protect their our Constitution?
Well, the other thing that goes with that, is if you go back to the 1780s, even go back to the drafting of the Constitution and the few years following, those politicians were not all people that were career politicians, that were corrupt, that were corporate lobbied, that were bought out, that were sold. They had the trust of their people. They did not have to fear their people throwing them over and taking over government, because they were put in there by a fair election system. They were put in there by fair nominations from their communities. You know, they were by the people, for the people.
Back in a time where the only way you could actually speak is you had to be in front of the people. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Congress has always has tended to have a historical 4-day week, because the 5th day, normally Friday, is when you would have to travel back from DC to your state to talk to your constituents, and it would take about a day and a half to get back to your people on a horse and buggy to tell them what happened in Congress, so that you can go back on Monday and get back to the legislation, now knowing what your people want you to do. Which is, again, part of history people forget. It's like, that's why there was always a traditional 4-day week. You're supposed to go back over the weekend and tell people, this is what I did, because there is no texting. There is no phone call. There is no, even the mail took longer. So you had to be in person.
And now today, even though they do, you know, they don't have to do the 4-day week, because now they can just stay right there and do it all via computer and TV and phone. They're not transparent.
No.
And they really don't care what their constituents say or tell them to do. This is why I made that statement just a minute ago, that when the founding fathers, when our first democracy politicians were drafting the Constitution and they wrote the Second Amendment, they absolutely did have in mind the means of dividing power to keep power in check.
They could have.
All right. Because they just lived it. They just lived a life of tyrannical control, dictatorship, kingship, whatever you want to call it. They just spent 5 years watching their families and friends die to fight for it. So they wanted a right for the people to not ever have to go through that again.
Yeah.
And if it did start to happen, there would be a right for the people to stand up and do it. So you look back, those people had the trust of their communities. They had the trust of their constituents. A lot of your politicians back in the late 1700s and early 1800s were not people that just randomly ran out and decided, hey, I'm going to campaign to be a mayor. They were people that were actually nominated from their communities because they did this good deed, or they did that good deed, or they helped people out with taxes. They would be nominated to be put in position for that candidacy, and then they would run. And nowadays, that's not the government that we have. The government that we have is no longer for the people. It is no longer by the people. It's by corporations, and it's all bought and paid for. It's become nothing but a giant monopoly. So it's so hard to argue with people on the historical significance of the 1776 draftings, of the Federalist Papers, in the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. Why would they put in the Declaration of Independence that it's not only your right but your duty to abolish and remove a government if the Second Amendment doesn't protect that right to do so?
Well, there's so much. I think people often forget, and we are, and throughout the show, I think we've been rather dispassionate in terms of emotion. We're not using emotion to make our arguments.
Right.
And that's part of transparency. See, if you have emotion, if you're fearful or you're angry, if you have hate in your heart, you can't talk about law. You can't talk about government, because your bias will always be present, and it will cloud you from making proper decisions. When we talk about the government, and you're talking about 1776, but also we can look at it today. And how many times have we been giving examples where there is clear evidence and fact, and that should be the end of the day? I mean, you can love or hate the Second Amendment all you want. You can love or hate my First Amendment rights. You can love and hate a whole bunch of things, but the thing that should guide you at the end of the day is it actually correct? Is this the best good? Is this what is legal and constitutional? What is it? Because you have to, that's the only way. We're passing these laws, and so many of them that we've talked about today, so many of these laws where we're looking at it and we're going, okay, and the consequence hurts us. This doesn't actually affect the people we want it to affect. It's not protecting anyone. It's doing the worst thing possible, because they're not being transparent, and because they're not explaining. I mean, literally, I've said this many times to many politicians. If you think gun control, as an example, we can say this about abortion, we can talk about the food shortage, we can go to a lot of subjects. If you think international policy, if you think it's actually good, fantastic. Explain it to me. I can show you line by line where I have a problem with some of these laws and the consequences of these laws. Can you tell me where I'm wrong? I have literally, when New York's red flag law was being considered, I literally had members of the Assembly and the state Senate on my program, unedited, and I asked them directly, here's my problem with it. In particular, I asked them directly about will this separate families? The answer I got from them and a dozen lawyers, yes, it will. That is allowed by the law. Are you going to correct that error? Are you going to prevent it from doing that? No. They voted for it anyway. I don't care how you feel about the law. There is an inherent flaw in this that politicians admit when asked a direct question, and they do it anyway.
Yep.
This is no longer a government that's about protecting the people. This is about protecting political power. And
Exactly.
for that reason.
Exactly. So I love democracy. I love our country, democracy when it's functioning properly. And I, being of the younger generation, I'm only 35. I have a lot of people that I went to school with that have the socialist ideals, that think socialism is so great. The free health care and the free college and all that, I hear it a lot. We don't live in a capitalist democracy anymore. Capitalism.
Never were.
No. I think it's more so, I refer to it as a corporatism. We are controlled by corporations, by elites and conglomerates, and these umbrella companies that lobby for presidents, for governors, for, senators, congressmen. The government that we have in place now is all about power. It's all about power across the world. It's all about world influence. It's all about controlling the people in the country. And it really shocked me to listen to that, like I was saying earlier when I first came on, that Kitty Worthman or whatever her name was, the Holocaust survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever listened to those interviews, to her congressional testimonies and her interviews?
I've talked to many people, survivors. I've lived overseas. I've talked to people who's lived overseas. So it's not an unusual statement to me. I've heard very similar, if not exactly the same thing, many times.
So she did hers May 11th, 2013. We were under Obama at the time.
Yes.
May 11th, 2013. That's 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, I wasn't as deeply involved with politics and with the Constitution and amendments. I was still in my 20s, whatever. But if you look at the history of 2013 and you look at the history of Obama and you look at the history of Bush and of the Clintons, her story was ahead of its time, if it makes any sense. What we've seen in the last 6 years, is exactly what her story sounds like. The way that the government has gone for the last 6 years, and it's not saying anything bad about Trump. It's just the government while Trump was there. I voted for Trump. I thought Trump was going to be a great president. First person that wasn't a career politician in my lifetime. I still think he was a pretty good president for, most cases. Sure, was he belligerent and arrogant on social media? I'm not going to disagree with that. I won't argue with that. Could he have handled some things a little differently? Sure, probably. But the most important thing that I think about him was he was the I don't care guy. He was the I don't care what you say. I don't care what you do. This is what needs to be done. We need to do it. And he was the first person I ever saw that really tried to push an America First type of agenda. Now, how much of that was real, I don't really know. I don't know if any of us will ever really know. But when I sat and watched this interview today that this lady did May 11th, 2013, it sounded exactly like the last 6 years.
Yeah, but this is not a new thing. We've been on this process. This is a process. See, we still have control of the country. We, the people, do. But we are being obfuscated and we are being led by emotion, mostly by the media. It's a very effective propaganda we have going on.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, we are the control of our government. Still, we have allowed these political parties, we have allowed these special interest groups on both sides to get involved and to convince us that we aren't as powerful or as important in the process as we have always been meant to be. Which is why I always tell people, I don't care who you vote for. I just want you to have a reason. I want you to have a solid, factual reason. Don't tell me it's how you feel. I could care less. Tell me you have a reason. I don't have to agree with you.
Yeah, nobody should vote based off emotion.
But they do. They vote on slogans. They vote on ads. They vote on the way someone looks. They vote on whether or not someone has been called a disparaging term. That is insane. Trump, they made Trump as an example. He was belligerent, and he was. That isn't new in politics.
No.
I've dealt with directly with politicians for 15 years, members everywhere from the local government all the way up to vice presidential candidates. I have yet to find one person who's in politics who isn't a arrogant, selfish individual to varying degrees. And you know
and
why?
egotistical.
Well,
egotistical. Yeah. You have to be egotistical.
You have to be a narcissist. You have to do that to have the skin thick enough to take the barbs and arrows and attacks from people who don't agree with your position.
Yep.
And Trump isn't the first one to be belligerent or have an attitude, arrogant, when he talks to the people. Have you ever seen President Johnson speak to anyone ever? There have been lots of presidents like that. It's politicians like that, because that's not what's important. Are they efficient? Are they effective? Have they understood the consequences of what they are doing? That's why people should be elected. When they aren't elected for those reasons, well, that allows corruption and that allows obfuscation of the public, and it always ends with this downward spiral that we're seeing right now. And the reason why it's so bad right now, it is because we're picking up right where Obama left off. Trump only had 4 years to try and put in a new system. Normally, we have more time to try and fix this stuff between bad presidents. We didn't. We're not doing that now. That's why it's so severe, because we're going back to failed policies. And that's not because I voted for Trump. Doesn't matter. I had some guy who's arguing with me earlier on Twitter. He's like, well, it's because you're a Republican. No, it's because I'm giving you facts. It's because I'm giving you evidence. It's because I'm looking at the reality. And it doesn't matter which side I'm on. Because
anybody with a brain that did any type of research or study or even just looked at the last 12 years wouldn't have voted for Biden. The election between Biden and Trump was sheerly done on emotion.
Well, yeah,
that's a very large majority of people that voted for Biden voted just because they didn't like Trump for some reason or another.
Well, that's why people can't tell you anything. That we are at the point right now that people don't know anything. They don't know policy. Ask anyone, and I'm sure you may have. Ask them, what's Joe Biden's international policy? And then, and what's his international policy on the campaign trail of 2020?
No, they don't know.
Because it doesn't exist. He never made one. But the thing is, most people are going to go, well, it's Ukraine. That's not an international policy. You want to say China? Well, he's being tough with China. That's not an international policy. Afghanistan, North Korea, I can go through all of it. He doesn't have one. But no one knows that because no one's ever asked the question, and they're not being allowed to go into detail and go, but Mr. President, what's your international policy? What's your domestic policy? What's your border policy? Not what you're doing this moment. What's your policy?
Well, that's the whole thing is nobody's ever been allowed to really ask any hard questions of Biden.
Of course we have. 40 years of being in politics.
Okay. No, you're not understanding what I'm saying. Since he's been president,
okay,
his appearances and the questions presented to him and so forth have been very, very, very controlled.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay. And since he's been president, nobody's been able to ask him the hard questions like, what's your policy on this? What's your policy on that? What's your, etc.
They don't want us to ask him.
Exactly. Because he is actually being controlled.
Did you see? Did you guys see? When did it happen? Probably 6 months ago. Did you see where he went off? He was out. They were doing a live thing. Oh shoot, what was it? It was regarding. I think it was regarding the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Okay. Yes.
And they were giving like a press conference. And they had military leaders and Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and a few other people were all sitting like at this, because we were still going through like the big COVID fear of the new Omicron wave or whatever it was that came out at the time.
It would either be July or August that you're talking about.
Somebody asked Joe Biden, and I remember it, and I recorded it with my cell phone because I knew it would get taken down real fast. Somebody asked Joe Biden why he would make a decision to do what he did. And he turned around and looked at the camera and said, "Do you really think I'm making the decisions in this administration? I'm just the guy telling everybody." And off, cut, just like that. They cut the audio, cut the video, everything. And then 5 minutes later, it came back up, and he wasn't talking. Like, everybody would ask him questions, and he wouldn't speak.
I would like to see that video. I do not know that video.
I will look through my phone tonight, and I will. I'll find it. I have like a little 30-second clip.
It took before Biden made any addresses to the people.
Oh yeah.
Or held any press conferences.
Why do you think everybody thinks that he's hiding in his basement? I don't think he's really hiding in his basement. I just don't think we're allowed to see him and talk to him.
Okay. With that, okay, I know Michael needs to go. I need to get out of here too. Yep. We've been doing this for about 2.5 hours now. So we're going to go ahead and end this roundtable. I want to thank everybody that tuned in and watched. Jan, I appreciate you joining in on the conversation with your comments and stuff. Do appreciate that. And we encourage any of our viewers to join in the conversation through either YouTube chat or through Facebook chat. We urge you all to visit our website at l1f.us. There we have many articles that touch on the Constitution, gun rights, history of the nation, etc. A lot of articles dealing with all of that. Michael Vasquez has got many articles dealing with red flag laws on our website. Along with, I've got a ton of articles talking about the Constitution, talking about gun rights, talking about history. Frank's got a ton of articles on there. So we do encourage any of you to go and visit our website, check it out. Check to see what we've got there. And that's l1f.us. While you're there, if you want to help us out with financial donation, that would help us hugely, because everything we do is out of pocket. And there are links on our website where you can make a cash donation. And if you can't help us out with cash donation, other ways that you can help us is by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. And you can do search on YouTube for the Liberty First Foundation or the Liberty First Range Report. And we encourage all of you to stay safe, shoot straight. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Zach, for joining this evening's roundtable.
Pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for watching.
Have a good night.
Thanks, folks.